Hello, everybody. We are live, and we are here with our buddy read discussion of The Edwardians by Vita Sackville-West. And I'm here with Courtney Ferriter of the eponymous YouTube channel. So I'll let her introduce her channel so y'all can get to know who she is before we dive right in.
Well, hello, it's Courtney, America's Jewish mother, as I say on my channel. And yeah, so I'm excited to be here with Margaret and to discuss the Edwardians.
Yeah. So, welcome. I'm going to pop her link in the chat, but first I'm going to ask, what prompted you to pick up this book? I think you thought you had it, and then you didn't when you agreed to buddy read it, and then you had to get it. Is that right?
That might be right. The reason I was interested in reading it is because it was actually recommended by my friend Taylor, who I knew from graduate school, and it was a text that he had assigned in a class. And sometimes he'll do this thing where he puts text on the course syllabus that he hasn't actually read yet, so then he's forced to read them, But it was one that he had done that with, and he said he read it and liked it, and I was like, well, that's good enough for me. I should read it if Taylor liked it,
Oh, okay, all right.
So I was curious about it for that reason.
Nice.
Yeah. What about you, Margaret? What interested you in reading this?
I can tell. So when I look on the back of this, it says Jacobson's Books. Floor used in 2015. So I can tell when I generally bought this. And I can't remember Jacobson's Books. I can't remember where that is. That's bad. But I think it's somewhere on a trip in Oregon. And so it's a used bookstore, and it's one of those like, oh, this is, $3, so I'll pick it up. And it's small, so it's easy to like carry if I was traveling somewhere. And as a October enthusiast and a historical fiction writer, it's one of those things where you're always looking for like period detail. And it's a bit weird because it's someone, the book is written in 1930, and it's writing about like 1900 to 1910-ish, the Edwardian period in London. And so it's one of those like you're getting a tiny slice, and you can maybe stretch it one way or the other, but you'd have to do more research to determine what's true. But yeah, that's why I pick sort of these sort of books up, because I'm always adding to my little treasure trove of research material.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I didn't know that it was a thinly disguised biographical sketch of all her peers from when she grew up. But that's what Wikipedia tells me. So first general question is, what was your initial impression after finishing? And then we could dive into particulars.
So my impression was that I appreciated the sort of critique of this society where there's a lot of luxury and a lot of wealth without a lot of reflection or caring about other people, right? Or other people's welfare, essentially. So I appreciate that it was a critique of that. And yeah, but I thing I didn't like about it is that I felt like there's a lot of telling and not a lot of showing, which we talked about. So
yeah, I should mention that. So the two buddy reads that I had in July, which are The Edwardians and The Essex Serpent, they were both the most disciplined on check-ins that I've done. So I've done like maybe 10 buddy reads before in the past year. And it's always been like, okay, we'll finish it by here and we'll have a show here. And like, that was it. We didn't like say any of our thoughts before like the 10 minutes before the show. And so this time when we were actually exchanging, oh, I like this, I mentioned this, I noticed this, on Voxer, it was like a little preview, kind of like having a English class discussion before you get to the end. So it probably changed my experience, but of course there's no counterfactual, so I can't say how. But yeah, so that was pretty cool. It's neat to have a different experience.
Mm-hmm.
My general impression on finishing it was, let's see. I'm always like struggling to remember how they end after I finish them.
Well, this ended sort of ambiguously.
It has a very neat ending, but I don't know if I trust it. Is that kind of the feeling that you got? Yeah. Okay, so without any spoilers, I'll just say that we have again, a Wikipedia crib, a Bildungsroman of a young man and basically a lot of women around him, and how he grows up in the Edwardian period and is exposed to different influences, decides one thing, ends up deciding another, goes through a bunch of choices, and then you come to the end decision. And I didn't feel like he had grown very much. It was delightful to sort of traipse through and see. It's kind of like going through It's a Small World. You see all like the animatronics. And you're like, wow, somebody did this. But then you get to the end and you're like, okay, did we grow? Did we change? Like, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely share your sense of, did we really see Sebastian grow as a character or not? Because, yeah, by the end, he says he's going to do something, but I feel like we both, as the readers, were like, but are you really? You know?
Right. Chat. There we go. Yes. All right. So overall impressions. Let's see. Here are my notes. Let's go to my notes here. What I did. So because we were using Voxer, I had verbal messages. So I didn't write them down. I had check-in number 1 and check-in number 4, I think. And so we can just go through some of those. Okay. We start with characters. So what kind of characters or caricatures do we see in this novel of manners about 1900 to 1910? Who stood out to you as the most interesting or the most emblematic, perhaps?
I feel like we do have a lot of character types. Certainly we see Leonard Anquetil, who's this explorer, and I think he kind of is representative of change or like taking a different pathway in life. And then we have Sebastian, who's this real sort of son of privilege and wealth, and someone whose life seems like pretty mapped out. And then, was it Teresa? Was that the middle class lady? Or did I? Let me say. Yeah, Teresa. She's the middle class. Yeah. Yeah, so she kind of represents like the middle class lifestyle and values, and then you have some, I guess, sort of servants and things like that in the background who represent that class level. So yeah, I feel like lots of character types, but not necessarily characters with individual minds and feelings of their own. What did you think?
I would say that's pretty true. We've got so we start out with a point of view character who's the young man growing up, but we also go into the heads of his mother and his mother's friend, and a little bit his mother's friend's husband, and Anquetil, the stranger who comes to visit. So we get a lot of different viewpoints, which I think I was trying to describe to someone else is I've been told that's bad as a writer, but I think that's just sort of like the modern vogue. It's not bad. I didn't used to be bad, but now it is head hopping. And so we get to see a lot of different viewpoints, but it's the same morality, it feels like, that is being imposed. We've got a question from G. Wright. Hello. To whom would you recommend this book? And I think it would be good for people who are looking for period detail. I don't think it's that. Well, I don't know. It was an interesting story. I don't know if it's that satisfying or what's the word? Like triumphant, like sort of satisfying ending. So
yeah, I feel like, Glenda, to your question, if you like books that are atmospheric or give you like a real sort of sense of setting, it would be a good book, but I think if you're somebody who is more of a character-driven reader or a plot-driven reader, this might not be completely satisfying on those aspects.
Yeah. 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 One of the storygraph questions is it slow, medium, or fast paced? And I was like, well, it's a very short book and a lot sort of happens in it, but there's a lot of, as you say, telling, not showing. And so it's people thinking through. And so instead of having a scene and a rest like you would to move the plot along, it's like the scene through everyone's thoughts. So it feels, I don't know, more chaotic than it necessarily needs to be. Yeah. What I thought was interesting. So what we're set at the beginning is a challenge, basically. It's like the gauntlet thrown down, because at the very beginning, Sebastian is sort of, what would you say? He's looking with a gimlet eye on his generation going, I don't know what I really want. I'm sort of comfortable here. I don't like my mom's friends. Like, what am I going to grow up doing? Well, I've got everything set out for me, so I don't have to worry, but I'm still thinking.
Yeah, and all he really knows is he really likes Chevron, which is the estate where he lives.
Right. He's very comfortable in the place where he grew up because he is familiar with its rhythms and its social mores, really, because when you're in the position of privilege, you don't have to worry about stepping out. So, and he's issued a challenge because someone is invited over who's an outsider, who's an Arctic explorer, because he's supposed to add color, for lack of a better term, to this all-white ensemble. And he doesn't fit in. He sort of, walks around and entertains people with his weird manners of not the upper class. And he ends up telling Sebastian that his life is set out for him. He has no choices left unless he does something drastic. And so Sebastian is then left sort of fumbling over this gauntlet thrown down the rest of the book, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was very successful as a starting point, and it launches us and it gives us like a clear path, but then we sort of muddle through the middle. How did you think of the structure and organization?
Well, the chapter titles were something that we had talked about in our Voxer conversations, because it ostensibly sort of looks like the chapter titles are centered around either the character or something like that, who's going to have the most influence or who's going to be the focus of the chapter. So there's 2 chapters named after Anquetil, 2 that are named after Sylvia, 2 that are named after Teresa, and 1 that's named after Chevron. But I feel like the 2 Sylvia chapters and the 2 Teresa chapters do center those characters, but the other ones don't always necessarily center that person or thing. So I wasn't too sure I understood the purpose of that.
Yeah, I agree. We were sort of in accord with like they're named, but they don't necessarily follow. It's just sort of giving there's something new to look forward to with the title chapters, but not really.
Yeah. But I do feel like the book has a clear structure in the sense of we get an introduction to Chevron and a feel for the place and stuff like that. And then, as you already said, Anquetil sort of throws down the gauntlet for Sebastian. And then we see him interact with people from his same sort of upper class part of society, but then also from the middle class part of society. And he feels like in both of their responses, he sees the same sort of hypocrisy that he doesn't like. Right. Or maybe not hypocrisy, but like lack of courage or conviction.
Which, sinner heal thyself, or whatever the phrase is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what just occurred to me is that, okay, so we have the 4 love affairs that he goes through, and let me, sorry, oh, there we go. Okay. We have the 4 love affairs that he goes through, and there's a lot of time spent with the affair with his mother's friend. There's a lot of time spent in Teresa's POV preparing, and then like the ultimate moment with Teresa and what happens. And then there's a fair amount of time with like the chorus girl who's like the actress who's like telling him like it is and maybe like rustling his cage a little bit.
Right.
There's no time on the page for the keeper's daughter. She's just referenced. So what that makes me think is that, okay, so the upper class of this time is having a lot of trouble regulating itself, regulating its relations with the middle class, and regulating its relationship with like the laboring classes that are trying to be socially mobile in the urban centers. But you know who they don't have a problem with? The people who are already under their shoe living on the estates, such as Chevron.
Yeah, that's true. That's a great point.
Yeah. Because it feels like it's such a symbiotic relationship until like bigger things come later to disrupt everything.
Yeah. Yeah, but I guess they don't have to worry about the lower classes doing anything to mess up their comfortable existence. So
not in this book, not in Vita's perspective, which is interesting, which I hadn't thought of before. So that's cool. Okay, so characters, plot, structure, titling. We had a soundtrack for this book for anyone interested. So there's a snowman, and you know what came to Courtney's mind immediately was
the song from Frozen, "Do You Want to Build a Snowman?"
Yes. So if anyone was looking for like, far-seeing references, obviously this book had it going on. And also like if anyone's on TikTok or if anyone's familiar with the Congos, the Come With Me Now, like that was definitely a moment towards the end as well. So we each had like a song, a Curtuous, that would be part of the soundtrack, which I just thought was funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. What would you say about the dialogue? Okay, two things. The dialogue and the tone of the novel, because I have sort of different opinions on both. Did you think it was fitting, etc.?
So I actually really liked the scenes where the characters had dialogue with one another, and to a certain extent it reminded me of last summer when I read Henry James's The Portrait of a Lady, because that's a novel where he, like, when he narrates, he's very what I call like self-conscious in the narration, which is like he's reminding you that there's a narrator and this is like an artificial book that he's writing. And I'm like, no, stop that. Just let the characters interact with each other. Let me like be in this world,
Right.
And I kind of felt the same about this book, which is I really liked when the characters were interacting with each other, and I liked it a lot less when there was a whole bunch of telling and, Vita Sackville-West was reminding me, like, literally at the beginning of this book, she's like, oh, it's so hard to start off books and, blah, blah, so arbitrary and blah, blah. I'm like, why are you telling me this? This should be like an editing thing you think to yourself.
Although also kind of epic. For the author who doesn't know how to start, just steal this approach.
I know, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Hi, Marilyn.
Yay! Cool. Someone else who likes period detail. How's it going? I really liked the dialogue because she brought in the most like fitting slang and rhythm, sort of like when you're gonna do something with Cockney rhyming slang, and like I am not going to be able to come up with that, right? I have to steal it from someone else. But she has the mincing, like say nothingness of the upper classes of this time, like down so pat that it was like listening to the Patter song in Music Man. So have you heard of Schmigadoon? Have you heard this like new show coming out?
Mm-mm.
So Kristen Chenoweth is a musical theater star, and she has this Patter song that is like trouble. It starts with T and that rhymes with P, and that sounds for pool. You know that song from Music Man? Like that. And it's just like run. Like you just keep talking for like 18 pages, right? That's the kind of thing where you're just like throwing things back and forth, and it's very rhythm, I think, dependent.
Yeah.
I was very impressed with dialogue. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's sort of like witty banter and then and thank you for mentioning that, Marilyn. But yeah, no, and I agree. Portrait of a Lady, when the characters interacted with each other, was also very like nice with like the witty banter and stuff. So maybe that was a function of both Henry James and Vita Sackville-West being a part of this like upper crust society that they're depicting, that they just like they've been so immersed in that environment that they can show you what that banter looks like, without I mean, it's just like it's so good. So
Yeah. In contrast, I'd say that the tone of the book. So a little bit of this is structure, I guess, but I felt like the tone was very conservative and restrained when she did all the telling and when she did all the detail in setting and in how she planned out what was happening. So when I noticed it, when it intruded so much that I noticed it, was when there was another point of view couple who was introduced to sort of ogle this woman who's having an affair and disapprove of her and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's here in the palace. Like, she doesn't deserve to be here, and not wanting their daughter to like hear anything that she says. This sort of like, cover your ears and all this nonsense. And so it was funny, but I was also like, and who are they? Like, who is this Alice person? And then it comes in later. It comes in later because she was being used as a significant character. She's one of like the love interests of Sebastian. So it's like, okay, so everything in here is moving to the purpose of expressing this one storyline, which is a little less satisfying because I think we're used to modern novels with a lot more going on and different levels. But
yeah, I mean, and I already mentioned Henry James, but one of the things he's sort of famous for saying is that novels are loose, baggy monsters, and I definitely feel like we do not get that in this book, because you're right, like it is all very controlled and it's very contained, and no character is there who like doesn't really need to be there.
Yeah, there's no supporting cast that has any thinking at all. Like none of the servants, like no one who changes. It's all sort of like furniture. It's weird.
Yeah.
Thank you, Katie. I hope.
I've also been enjoying the spoiler alert banners.
I don't think anyone's gonna read this based on our recommendation, but I'm glad we did, and we can now like move on. And it's representative of the period, so like it was interesting to go through. Yeah, I mean, I had March of the Moderns, and this does fit in with that, but I just didn't do it then. So I guess would I pair it with any one of those? It's so caustic. I don't know that I had any others that were so, I don't want to say bitter, but caustic about their own peers. I don't know. Did any of that rub off on you in terms of like, or did you learn anything about Vita's life elsewhere that would lead you to think something about along those lines?
Yeah, I don't really know that much about her life. I mean, except obviously I know she and Virginia Woolf were lovers for a while, and whatever I think the granddaughter might have written the introduction to this. And talked about how it sort of mirrors the house and the estate that Vita Sackville-West lived in, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I don't really know a ton about her life. How did we decide to buddy read it? That's a good question, Glenda. I think I don't remember how this came up. Was it that I hauled it and you were like, I have that? Or did we decide it before I hauled it? I don't know.
Either that or it was the other way around. Because like what I said was I think you thought you had it and then you didn't and had to get it. But yeah, I've had this since 2015. So it was one of those like, it was out and I kept thinking, oh, I should read that. And it seemed like a good discussion one because it was rich in period detail. So it would be good for discussion.
Yeah.
Let's pick apart its bones now that no one's interested in reading it. Maybe I could just dispense with the spoiler alert banner.
Well, one thing I did think we should talk about is like how is the quote unquote Edwardian period, which was from 1901 to 1910, how are we, based on this book, if this book is meant to be representative of what that period of time was like, how is it that distinct or different from the Victorian era? What do you think?
Oh, okay. So when we chatted about this, I was talking about the novel versus the era, but this is a good question too. So, is anyone a Downton Abbey fan? I don't know. Have you watched it?
I have not seen it. I mean, I know what the sort of general premise of it is, but I don't think I've ever actually seen it.
Right. And you've got Dame Maggie Smith. So obviously it's on the to-watch list. But
right. I mean, I do love Maggie Smith. So
yes, me too. But I've only watched like 4 episodes and it was like 5 years ago. So it was when it like first came out. And so I don't know the whole arc of the story. But basically, what that show highlights is the tension between the aristocracy and the changing structure of the economy for Britain. And then they also introduced the American wife, which is like the American, there's a name for like the women who came over who tried to like earn a title with their money earned in America. I can't remember what it's called. Someone will probably know in the chat. Okay, your friend Glenda, is that right? Apparently a Downton fan. Yeah. That's totally fair. But yeah, so that dollar mistresses, I can't remember what the name of it is. Anyway, so those two tensions are the ones that I remember from the show, and this is exclusively in London, but you do have the changing order. So an Edwardian era thing that would not be Victorian would be like, instead of workers organizing for labor strikes for the 8-hour day as they did in like the 1840s and 1850s or whatever, and changing parliament, you've already done the changeover in Victoria's reign from real reigning to figurehead reigning. I feel like Edward, and here's where I'm gonna like not remember all the different heads of state, but people between Victoria and Elizabeth II were sort of not as long lasting, and so a lot more changes got done to rationalize the system and sort of separate things. So that is a different issue than the main one in Victorian, which is like class warfare and what's it called? The franchise, sort of franchise and stuff. So, but women still didn't get to vote until after ours did, I think. So anyway.
Really? I thought women could vote in Britain before they could vote in the United States. Somebody should look that up and correct us.
So it varied by state in the U.S. And I think maybe some of the states got it before, but maybe nationally the UK got it before us.
Yeah, because we didn't get the right to vote in the U.S. until 1920. That I definitely know, but
right. Nationally.
Yeah.
I think in Montana may have been first earlier.
Really? Random.
Yeah. Well, those Western women, what are they doing? Tearing stuff up. Marilyn says, I saw a play on Broadway called Vita, and the audience all knew the inside jokes, but I didn't. They wrote a lot of letters to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a book on my list that's called Square Haunting by Francesca somebody, and it's about the same square near each other in London, the Bloomsbury group, and sort of how everyone was in each other's beds at some point kind of thing, and everyone was writing and being inspired. But I don't know the inside story either. I'm not a huge Virginia Woolf fan, so I probably would miss a lot of those jokes too.
Oh, that's interesting, Duncan. Thank you for that. What is the post-Edwardian era? Who came after Edward VII? This is me being an Americanist right here.
Okay, so let's see. Wikipedia. 1930 British novels. What are we on here? Country House. Wikipedia is not giving me the link that I want here.
Okay, thank you, Glenda. Glenda says in the UK women could vote in 1928. So you were right.
Oh, okay.
We could vote earlier in the US. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yes.
See, this is collaborative. People are correcting us.
Yeah, I know. We're stumbling through. Edwardian era was short but pivotal. It ushered in the modern era. So what I would... Okay, so he's being a strict constructionalist here, saying that Edwardian was when Edward was reigning. But as Americans, when we use the word Victorian for the houses that are here, that makes no sense to a strict constructionalist because there was no Victoria reigning here in America. So what are we doing? I feel like I'm writing it more broadly.
I mean, Duncan, you can correct me if I'm wrong in misinterpreting if I'm wrong in interpreting your comment here, but I feel like what I'm getting from your comment is that it's pivotal because it's like this transition point to modernism, right? Which is very like right after World War I. era. So I feel like that's what I'm getting from your comment, but
Right.
oh, interesting.
Right. It's class against gender. They're property, women of property, I'm sure. Yeah.
Dollar princesses, Stephanie says.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Stephanie. I was like, dollar mistresses. I was so close. The pejorative term for American heiresses who tried to marry for a title in Europe, such as a Vanderbilt, if you will. Yeah. Her hunting is fantastic. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it. Okay, I have that on Libro. On Libro.fm. Yeah.
So for me to get back to this question about like what distinguishes like this novel as like quote unquote Edwardian versus a Victorian novel, I mean, not that I've read a ton of Victorian novels, but I mean I have read some, and for me, I feel like almost always in the background of a Victorian novel, you see the poverty and the industrialization of society, even if it's marginalized. Like, even in a book like The Picture of Dorian Gray, which is very much focused on upper class people in society, you still get this sort of like gothic, darker, impoverished background setting. And I feel like we don't see that at all in the Edwardians. Like, we don't at any point see any sort of poverty or struggle. I mean, we do see people who are in a lower social class, but that's really about it, you know?
Right. Okay.
And I don't know what that means, but that was just something I noticed.
Yeah. So you're mentioning the novel instead of the era. Like Jane Austen's novels, they have a mention of their own milieu, and they don't really go into any of the other classes because it wasn't done. It was always the threat of falling, right? Because when you're in the higher class, the worst thing ever is to not be in that position of privilege anymore. And so that's like existential threat for them.
Right. I think those are in the Georgian era, though, aren't they?
Georgian / Regency. To be strict about it. Yes. But yeah, so Victorian novels, I think, struggle more with like humanity and dealing with each other and the whole society, whereas I wouldn't say this is an Edwardian novel. I would say it's a modern novel because it as we were discussing before we went live, there's a whole new post-Victorian, there's a whole new thread of intergenerational conflict that starts happening, because it's no longer you're going on as you've always gone on. The industrial era has sort of thrown everything into hijinks. And so generations are fighting against each other for how they're going to change and who's going to win, and social mobility and all this kind of stuff. So I'd say this is a modern novel, but you can fight me. You can fight me.
When you say modern, you don't mean modernist, right?
I would leave that to you. I'm saying like post 1918, like with all that sort of revision of the form and that kind of thing.
Okay. Then that would be what I would consider to be modernist. Although I don't know that I agree that I would consider this modernist. Although I get what you're saying with like revision of form and stuff. That is a quality of modernist literature. Okay. But I'm also like, did Vita Sackville-West really make anything new here? You know?
I think she put together a very titillating book for people who would sell a lot of copies and entertain a lot of people across the Atlantic, because it was written and published in 1930, and this is at a time of great, depression and poverty, and so people were laughing. That one of the reviews I said they were able to laugh at the fact that the upper class Edwardians in London, who you would think everyone could look up to, also have lives of empty desperation. And so, hey, we're not so bad off after all, kind of.
But I mean, couldn't they have just read Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray?
I haven't read it.
It's so good.
Okay. All right. One on my list.
I mean, it is, I guess it's technically Victorian because it was written in 1890, I believe.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like that's also a book where you get a lot of focus on the upper class of society and how ultimately empty and shallow that life is. Although I guess, again, it's in the Victorian period instead of the Edwardian period, but that's like, I guess, the only real difference.
So he essentially, like, this isn't a spoiler because I haven't read it, so you can just tell me if my pop culture osmosis, a la Melissa, is working. It's essentially he like sells his soul to stay in his position of privilege forever.
Yeah, well, it's really to retain his youth and beauty.
Okay, but that's his highest value because he's already in a position of privilege, right?
Yeah.
Youth and beauty wouldn't matter too much if you had consumption. Like
right.
Okay, so existential threats, losing your youth and beauty. And what's funny, being written by a gay man, is that would typically be a womanly trait that you would not want to lose. You know, like that would be your everything, your reputation is your youth and beauty. As Lucy? Is Lucy? No, that's the mom. Sylvia would claim in this book. Yeah. Interesting.
Well, and the other interesting thing about the picture of Dorian Gray, I mean, not to like get too far out into the woods about something else, but the interesting thing about it is it was actually used as evidence against Oscar Wilde at his sodomy trial.
Yeah, I do remember hearing about that, and I don't know what that relates to because I haven't read it, but yeah. And actually, I think that there's a Jane Austen mystery that I read that points to picture of Dorian Gray as part of its plot. Like she's sort of like mashed up Jane Austen as a detective, or Jane Austen's characters as detectives with picture of Dorian Gray. I was like, sure, let's jump on in. Like, why not?
To Glenda's question, I don't really know because I feel like this is the only book that I've read so far that specifically addresses the Edwardian period.
Well, I mean, it's got it in the title, but all the March of the Moderns books are a good place to start. Some of them are in the earlier Edwardian period. Sandy's here. Happy Friday. Let's see. 20s is after. The Marrow of Tradition was really good, but that's nothing to do with the Edwardians in London. It's North Carolina. So I
mean, I have read a lot of books that are around like the turn of the 20th century, but they're all American books and not, you know, books that were written about England.
So I will think about that one and see if I can get back to you on it, Glenda. Sorry, I don't have anything at the tip of my head. Let's see. Duncan's back with the last hurrah of the aristocracy and having their power unchallenged. The rise of trade unions and women becoming involved in politics challenge the status quo. Woohoo! Go trade unions!
Yeah, and that actually kind of tracks with some things that happen in the book where we see at one point a power struggle between a couple who is married because the woman wants to do one thing and the man thinks that she shouldn't be able to do that, and I'm not going to give too many spoilers.
Well, okay, we'll leave it up there so that we have deniability. How about that?
Yeah.
So who do you think would represent the modern era, if anyone, in this? I think Viola definitely qualifies. Leonard Anquetil definitely qualifies. Those are, I think, the characters that are stirring things up, and Leonard, as the man, is more active and being the inciting incident, as well as at the end to sort of tie things in a bow. But Viola is the quiet daughter that no one thinks much of. Like, you think she's 12 the way they treat her until the end, and you realize, oh, she's been doing this whole thing. This is great. And I feel like she's the stand-in for Vita's character. But yeah.
I mean, I would say those two as well. I would say Viola and Leonard Anquetil, and I feel like Sebastian's character is the one who's at the crossroads, right? Like, he's not sure whether he wants to try to cling to this comfort and luxury of this life that he already has, / also the Edwardian era, or whether he should sort of forge ahead with his sister and Leonard to find something new in the modernist era, you know?
Yeah, we do see him vacillating, and I just don't think it's very sympathetic because of his position. But I think that's the author's point of view as well. Yeah. I would also mention Phil, and you wanted to maybe do a little like hat tip to Tallulah Bankhead and how that might have been her. So do reveal.
Yeah, so there is a character that Sebastian has a love affair with toward the end of the book, who is presented as this like bohemian actress. And I really thought that character might have been based on Tallulah Bankhead, because Tallulah Bankhead was very successful in the London on the London stage in the 1920s, and this book was written in 1930, and just the way that this character is portrayed as, you know, like very bohemian and someone who like makes her own rules and like gets up whenever she wants and has this very rowdy life, and it just very struck me as very Tallulah-esque, and so I wondered if it was modeled after her or not. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, we may never know. I didn't see anything in any of the reviews, but that's pretty detailed. So, and you didn't see it in your book. That was not that great of a book that you just read about her. So you'll have to read another one.
The biography. But it does make me wonder, because Tallulah Bankhead had these followers called the Gallery Girls, who would like come and see all of her shows and stuff. And it makes me wonder whether Vita Sackville-West might have been a gallery girl on the DLs.
That's a neat connection. Yeah. Thanks for coming, Glenda. Nice to meet you.
Yes, thank you, Glenda.
Maybe Dorian Gray.
Listen, I'm happy to reread Dorian Grace.
I don't have it. So that's one of the missing.
That's a Project Gutenberg-able
That's true.
text.
True. Yeah. So Duncan's saying Ian Forster, great. Thank you for that save. A great Edwardian era novelist, especially Howard Zinn, which was published at the end of the era. I read A Passage to India, which is also very good for March of the Moderns. And I read that with Rainier Books. And so if you want to read the chat on that, I did the same spoiler thing. So that one I actually might encourage you to read, because it's very different in tone and explores, I think, bigger themes than just this sort of like caustic societal cattiness. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never read Forster, but he's one that like I'm gonna eventually get around to at some point. So
yeah, it's good. It's good. I mean, Room with a View, you have a adaptation ready made if you wanted to like do a little thing. So it's always fun. We like Dame Maggie Smith. I also love Helena Bonham Carter, so she's in that as a young miss. So a good one. Okay, other details that come to mind. Did you have any you want to spring on me?
Yes, the casual anti-Semitism.
Yes.
So that was something that I feel like has come up in a number of books that I've read during that time period, right? Like it comes up once in Picture of Dorian Gray, it comes up once in Anna Karenina, but like this book, for being not even 300 pages long, and it's so random. I mean, they're just like, it's not quite this random, but it's almost as random as they're talking about the weather or something, and then all of a sudden somebody will say, by the way, I hate Jews, you know?
It was not a description. It was just an assumption. It was just like baked in. That's what hit me. And I was just like, hey, what about this and this? And you were like, oh, that's just par for the period. And I was like, oh, okay. Am I just now noticing this? I didn't see it in the other books that I read for March of the Moderns as much.
Well, that's good.
That like that level. So I was pretty taken aback by it. And you were like, yeah, I just sort of take that in stride now. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, no, Stephanie, I totally agree with you about that. But yeah, like even though I have seen it before in books like A Picture of Dorian Gray or Anna Karenina, I was kind of taken aback just by how many times it occurred in the Edwardians. I mean, like 5 or 6 times over the course of a 285-page book feels like kind of a lot, you know? Even though, again, it was par for the course. So, and
it's in no way essential to the plot. Right. So we have one character, Sir Adam, who is like, I'm gathering this because we're not told that he's new money, that he's Jewish. And so he's not acceptable to some of the upper class circles. People look down on her for including him in her social circle. She's dithering about whether she wants to have an affair with him because he's Jewish. And then like the only thing people talk about with him at the dinner party where he's at his money. And it's just like, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Is in most British novels until about the 1970s. More explicit in earlier novels and then becomes more and more coded. Oh, good point. Good point. Yeah. Yeah. We were just, before we went live, we were just talking about how quickly the change has been happening, that things are no longer okay. You were mentioning that was a book published in 2000 by Roth that his, you know, treatment of certain characters is like, we couldn't do that now, like only 20 years later. Yeah. Yeah, big sea changes in literature. It's interesting. And there's that cancel culture tag going around. Did you just did this, right?
Yeah, I just did this earlier this week.
Yeah, I have not done it yet, but in thinking about that, that's one of the things that came up to me, is that we change our acceptances of things much more quickly these years, and so you're expected to know, because the speed of information is such that you have little excuse for not knowing that times have changed and like people don't like being called this, so maybe change your language and whatever you're publishing, kind of thing.
Right. Well, I mean, to Duncan's point, though, it's like pretty crazy that that was the norm, or that was pretty acceptable up until the 1970s. I mean, considering that, I mean, people knew what happened during the Holocaust not that long after it happened. I mean, certainly you knew by the, you know, mid to late 1950s. So it's kind of incredible that it carried on even that long, you know?
I feel like it's a mindset change more than like a discrimination change. Like in society, people were used to thinking like, these people are like this, these people are like this, and having everyone in a box. Whereas now in the past 20 years, I feel like we're like circuiting has changed in terms of, I can't treat someone like that because that's not appropriate. And whether you think that's good or bad is kind of where you are on the political spectrum. But yeah, interesting. Information age. Woohoo! Yeah, good. That was a good point. Let's see. Self-loathing, naturalism, Alice, inevitability, hypocrisy. I got a lot of stuff I could throw in there. Chaos. Okay, let me go back to my notes. In Wikipedia saying, let's see, Chevron. Would you want to visit Chevron? There's a question.
I mean, it sort of seems like a lesser version of Versailles. So yeah, it'd be cool to visit, you know?
Yeah.
Seems pretty epic.
Who do you think would be the most interesting friend of these, like, and why? I'll throw some of the characters out there to remind you. So we've got Leonard.
I think I'm gonna say Sylvia.
Sylvia.
If she actually told me about all of the things that she does.
All the affairs. Okay, all right.
Because like as a proper Yenta, I just like need to know about the gossips.
I'm really interested in okay, so Miss Wacy, as she calls her, and Mrs. Wickenden, the housekeeper. So one of the things I like learning about, and so like sort of this class discussion in historical fiction, is the people who are in between, like governesses or housekeepers. There was no one else on your same level. So you were just sort of isolated and you had no friends unless you found someone like Mrs. Wickenden, the housekeeper, found her sister-in-law, who used to be a servant at the house. So she knew all the people involved, but she wasn't there anymore. So she wasn't below her level and like off limits. And so that's who would come, and she'd have tea and like dish all the tea and be like, okay, that's sort of like fascinating, because like, do we have that same sort of social hierarchy today that isolates certain people? I don't think so. That's like a completely different problem, really, social problem that no longer exists. Or am I wrong?
I don't know. I mean, I definitely think that people tend to spend a lot of time with other people of their own race and social class.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in part because the way neighborhoods are set up in most of the United States, they kind of already automatically separate us based on those two factors.
Right.
And then depending on what kind of work we do for a living, that will also play into how much exposure we do or don't have to other people who are different from us in one way or another. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like we have the illusion of not being as isolated, but I don't know that we actually aren't almost just as isolated.
Right. That's a good point. So one of the contemporary books I'm listening to right now is The Other Black Girl, and it's about a Black woman at a publishing company that is so white, and is like, gosh, I mean, can't imagine that happening. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff happening in as well. But the feeling of being like the only person who has to represent for your race and like be that like token person in any setting, that's kind of the same isolation. It just produces different effects, I suppose, because of where we are socially. So that's good. That's a good reflection. Yeah. It's funny, like you take this novel from 90 years ago and say, oh, well, this status position no longer exists between the classes. But then you think, oh, well, race. Just like race, sexuality, gender, like class, all this stuff just flows across the borders. This makes literature interesting.
Yeah.
Is there any book you would relate this to that's contemporary or that's like from a later period that you're like, it's kind of like this, like a set piece or comps, if you will?
I'm going to think about that. Do you have one that you had in mind while I think about it?
No. That's why I was throwing it to you. But yeah, that can be our like last chew on it for a bit question. Yeah, because what this reminds me of actually is Edith Wharton, who was writing about the same time period. And so a very different sensibility and different themes, but same time period, same set. I really liked Edith Wharton when I read her in high school and college and haven't read her since. So that's like my far back memory sort of pulling that back in.
So you're wanting a comparison to something that's like around the same time period.
Or later, like, so just same in different ways, I guess. Like, do we have a 50s timepiece that's like this? Stephanie's saying she's about to say Edith Wharton. Yeah.
Well, this might be a weird comparison off the top of my head, but you know how like millennial fiction is a genre now?
Like Sally.
I feel like there's maybe some similarities just in the sense that I feel like millennial fiction is often supposed to be like a belated coming of age. I mean, because, you know, millennials are now our age, you know, so, and, you know, it's about sort of like, what are you know, you're at a transition point. What are you going to do with your life? What is millennial culture like, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like, in a weird way, it relates to this, just way different time period and values, you know?
Really? No, that's the perfect answer because, yeah, a belated coming of age is that we're in a privileged, I will speak for myself. I'm in a privileged position totally because right now, like, you know, with the earth falling to pieces and the economy like crumbling to bits, it's kind of like, well, what am I going to do with all the stuff that I was prepared to do? Like, throw my talents to the wind because this is not the world I signed up for. It's changing under my feet. Like, so what do I pivot to do that's like useful rather than just like perpetuating the same inequity? And that's a hard decision. But, you know, it's like millennial fiction. Like, who really wants to listen to that? Anyone on my YouTube channel? Hello. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a really good comparison. I will put that in the tweet when I tweet this out. That's funny. Marilyn says, it's funny about class. I moved from a lower middle class neighborhood in Brooklyn to a lower middle class neighborhoods in Hawaii. Despite the culture difference, pretty similar. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Because I feel like maybe the thing that separates us the most in the United States is like socioeconomic class. And I mean, this is a really random association I just made, but did you ever see that SNL skit where Tom Hanks is in like Black Jeopardy and he's playing the Trump supporter?
I don't think so. I've definitely seen Black Jeopardy on SNL, but I don't think I've seen a recent one with Trump.
Well, it wasn't recent. This is from like a little while ago, but or at least a few years ago. But yeah, but that sketch basically was trying to make the point that white Trump supporters and African Americans actually have a lot of stuff in common if they could just get past the racism.
Yeah. I was trying to like think if it was the same between the US and the UK in the old time period versus like Brooklyn and Hawaii in like the 40s, 50s, 60s. I mean, it's a different melting pot, right? You've got Maryland is representing like Jewish Puerto Rican part of Brooklyn, and when I think of Hawaii, I think of like Japanese descendants and tourists and developers. Like, what kind of mix is that? So I don't know what those backgrounds would bring to the. Do we melt and get together, or do we stay apart like the two SNL? The sketch thing you're mentioning. Yeah. Oh, that's good. Well, now I have something to watch after I.
Oh my God, it's so good. It's so good.
It's one of those that when you watch, you could see like it's so heart wrenching, but also hilarious that you can't see it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but it was so smart. Just put in Tom Hanks' Black Jeopardy.
Yeah. Okay, Sandy's got to drop. Thanks for stopping by, Sandy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sandy.
Oh, boy.
By the way, does anybody who's still on here have questions or anything they want to ask?
Yes, I'll put the questions back up. We have a few minutes left in our sort of generally calibrated hour. The Edwardians, I think we went through most of the questions and the points that I had. Symbols. If you're looking for symbolism, the ending to this book is pretty primo, I will say. Like, it's like chef's kiss, the ending symbolism for me. Mm-hmm. I mean, besides the decision at the end, the whole coronation thing was pretty on the nose in a way that I appreciated. So
I'm gonna read the last sentence, and this is with no context, so it doesn't spoil anything. But this is the last sentence of the novel. The coach came to a standstill in Grosvenor Square. And it's very symbolic, as you said.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know if I said that right or not. Whatever.
What did you say? Wait. The coach came to a standstill in Grosvenor Square.
Grosvenor. Is that how you say that?
Yeah, Grosvenor. Normans. I don't know. But yeah, you're right. Even that last sentence with no context. It's funny. I live in a local Hawaiian neighborhood on the west side of Oahu. Oh, we're gonna get some tea on Hawaii. I feel it coming.
My parents actually lived in Hawaii for a while. My dad was in the Army, and they lived in Hawaii for I think like 3 years. So.
How did they like it?
Fine. I mean, I think it wasn't necessarily their favorite place to live because they weren't necessarily enjoying what Hawaii had to offer, at that point. Because, my dad was like having to run up mountains and stuff.
Yeah. Does he have similar inclination to you in terms of the natural setting and hiking?
No, neither of my parents are like big outdoors people, so.
Got it.
So I come by it honestly.
Nice. I had friends, one who lived in the Navy with his wife, and they were there for a good 3 years, I guess, and people visited them and took advantage of that. I have a friend in Hawaii, like, are you gonna get that again? And they liked it, but they were moving around and like sampling all the port cities and having a good time of it. So Yeah. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any questions, so why don't we just say, what are you reading next, and what is coming up on your channel next, so we can give people a little preview for what to expect.
Oh, that's a good question. So right now I'm trying to finish up Louis Manan's The Free World, which is about art and thought in the Cold War. It's an excellent nonfiction book that was released this year, so I will be finishing that up soon, although it's been a project. I've been reading it all this month.
Is that a nice book?
No, it was just one that I wanted to read because I really like Louis Manan's book, The Metaphysical Club.
Okay.
And this is a staggering work of scholarships. So I'm reading that. I'm definitely planning on some lighter reads in August because the book, I've been judging the BookTube Prize in nonfiction, and book I'm reading right now is about the use of rape as a weapon of war. So as you can imagine, that is not fun reading.
Right. I was producing a talk for A Mighty Blaze yesterday where it was Ian Manuel, who just wrote a book called My Time Will Come, and it sounded a lot like the solitary story of Albert Woodfox, like being in solitary for decades and then being let out by the Equal Justice Initiative, and just like how can people survive that, and why do we do this still?
Yeah.
Oh, Stephanie.
Yes,
for Free World. So there
Stephanie,
you go.
it's so good. Please read it and then tell me your thoughts.
Yeah, that sounds good.
It's a little all over the place. I mean, not totally, because it's all about art and thought in the Cold War, but like it definitely, like, there's like a ton of people mentioned in the book, and I'm like, this is a lot of people to try to keep track of. So
I am almost finished with The Essex Serpent, which I've had for like 2 years, and I'm finally doing a buddy read, and it's really good. Really good. Recommend for sure. It's a period. We were just debating actually what date it was, and we all had different dates in our heads from when we were going through it. So I was thinking like 1890s, 1900s, but other people thought it was earlier or later. So we'll see. The Buzzwordathon that I may or may not get to is Last American Man by Elizabeth Gilbert, and that's why I bought it, because I thought, oh, this is before she was famous. Like, I'd love to see what she was doing on her own initiative as a freelancer. And then Half God of Rainfall, Inwa Elams, is a poet, and this is like a mashup of epic poetry with West African mythology, basketball.
That sounds fascinating.
And it's short, so I thought I could do it. And I've gotten like 2 chapters in, and I'm reading this with Sandy Golston, and I don't think he started it yet because he's still in his like thriller kingdom. But I'm like, hey man, this is about basketball. You have to meet me halfway. So yeah, hopefully that's what I'll finish before the end of July. But nice. Oh, and these, I'm hoping to finish these before the end of July. I just picked up some Thin Mints, like on my priorities. Yeah. So I think we're good.
All right. Well, thank you for hosting us, Margaret. I've enjoyed this.
Yeah, I think we did a pretty thorough job of smashing the Edwardians. Thank you, Vita Sackville-West, for this this step down the Edwardian lane, and thank you all for coming and listening to us trash it a little bit, but also, thoughtfully discuss all the tropes of the era. Hopefully that helped you decide what to read or not read, and you'll come back for next time and subscribe to both our channels. So thanks so much, and we'll talk to you again soon.